And happy Thursday, Xavier fans. We're here on our Razor Cast, everything about Xavier men's basketball. I'm Jeff Zink, and fresh from Asheville, North Carolina, the microbrew capital of the United States, we're welcoming Jim Reaker on the road.
Good morning, Xavier fans. The sun is bright and shining here in the mountains of western North Carolina this morning. It's going to be a beautiful day. Great start to the season for the Musketeers last night. Got to watch most of the game, streaming it online right here in my hotel room.
Sweet. You and Tinkerbell with what's going on in the back of you there. The Big East got started last night with 4 games, and we'll, of course, talk about Xavier first. Xavier hosting the Providence Friars, and actually it was pretty much a non-game. The Xavier we've been expecting to come out all year came out and did what they did with defense, holding down the Providence best players and just running away and keeping their foot on the pedal throughout the night.
Yeah, what I saw, the word that came to my mind is just taking care of business, doing what they need to do, playing up to their full potential maybe for the first time for a full 40 minutes. That had been kind of the problem lately, that sometimes they get a lead and they would let a team back in and not put them away. But last night they never let the Friars get close at all. Played great defense, moved the ball well, balanced scoring. The impressive thing, the 2 leading scorers for the Providence Flyers, Rodney Bullock was averaging 18 points, and the Musketeers held him to 2. Most of that fell on Trayvon Blewett. And Emmett Holt, the big man, who was averaging 13 points, Rasheed Gaston held him to only 4. So you got to be impressed with that defense, and I've talked about that all year. That's one thing that the Musketeers do very, very well that some teams in college basketball don't do very well anymore.
No, they're very good, and that's going to be their trademark. But the nice thing is that the shooters came out, too, to score 82 while holding Providence to this 56. We expect them to hold teams in the low 60s, to be able to come out and score and also get plenty of minutes from other participants, which is something we've talked about as well. The top minute, again, was Blewett with 31, but he's been doing 35, 36. So maybe Coach Mack's starting to get his rotation in there as we head into Big East season.
Yeah, and I'd like to mention Sean O'Mara, because he's been struggling a little bit in a reserve role behind Rasheed Gaston. But last night, I think he played pretty well, best he's played in a long time, and scored 8 points and had 3 rebounds. In fact, the big men together had 22 points and 11 rebounds in that combined position with Rasheed Gaston, Sean O'Mara, and Tyreek Jones. So that's a very positive sign for the Musketeers.
Yeah, could be interesting moving forward. Now, they have been at home and through the exams and the holidays, 4 straight home games. They have to hit the road, and New Year's Eve they're going to go to D.C. and play the Georgetown Hoyas, who opened their Big East against traveling to Marquette and lost by 10. So what can we expect when the Muskies go to the Hoyas, who they have beat 4 out of their last 5 games?
Yeah, but as we've talked about, Georgetown's kind of the unknown in the Big East this year. I think they have a lot of talent. They're led by Rodney Pryor, a transfer student from Robert Morris, and this is his first eligible year after sitting out a year. He's been averaging 20 points a night, and he did put up 23 last night against Marquette in that losing road game for him. So, here's the thing I think we got to look at we got to feel positive about for the Musketeers, that they have played a tough schedule and have gone on the road, which a lot of teams, big programs, don't do a lot during their non-conference schedule. So hopefully maybe now those 2 tough losses on the road to Baylor and Colorado, hopefully we see those pay off on Saturday when they go up against the Hoyas in Georgetown.
Well, as we've talked several times on both this and the Trogcast, right now it's no shame to have a loss to Baylor on your your list. They're still one of the only 5 undefeated teams. Colorado was a bit of a shock, but I agree with you. They're road tested and ready to go, and they do seem to have the Hoyers number lately. So tune into that. It's Saturday afternoon, and actually Saturday morning, I think. Isn't it like an 11 o'clock tip-off?
11 a.m. Eastern time, and of course that'll be followed by the big, almost maybe not as big after what happened last night, but Villanova-Creighton game will be right after that. It's a nice Big East doubleheader to start off your New Year's Eve.
Mm-hmm. And that leads us right into the Big East news we got to talk about here. Villanova, they hadn't played in a week, but they almost got caught napping against DePaul at home, which was a bit of a shocker. And, of course, maybe they were looking forward to that game against Creighton, who easily took the Seton Hall Pirates by 14 at home. Those are the 4 games. Butler starts off against St. John's tonight, so that'll be the 5th one. But did you get to see any or read anything about that DePaul game, which was actually quite exciting there at the end?
Yeah, no, the only thing on the Xavier broadcast I was watching, the announcers kept referring to that game as it being very, very close, and so I did kind of pull it up on, watch it on ESPN's live cast, and the only thing I saw was that they had a chance to tie it at the end. They had a wide open 3, but didn't go down, so the Wildcats of Villanova survived. So what'll be interesting to try to figure out down the road was that is Villanova not as overpowering as we thought they were going to be, or is it DePaul maybe going to be better than some people predicted? Most people have them predicted maybe in the 8th or 9th position in the preseason rankings for the Big East. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, how DePaul plays in their next game, and again, how Villanova comes out against Creighton, who took care of a pretty good Seton Hall team very handily last night at home out in Omaha, Nebraska.
Yeah, no, there's the only surprise was that DePaul game. It was tied at 58, and then tied again at, well, not almost tied, but it was 62-61 until Josh Hart hit a big 3 to put them up, and then Villanova held on throughout the end. Very exciting game, and like I say, who knows if it's just an anomaly. DePaul played its best while Villanova played its worst, and we'll see. Well, I think we'll find out on Saturday when another unbeaten will fall, because Creighton and Nova are 2 of the last 5 teams. Of course, if you're watching basketball, we'll talk more about this on Tuesday. UCLA did fall to Oregon last night on the last-second shot. Not a surprise with the Oregon hosting them. They had a 33-game win streak there on campus. So right now, I don't think either of us had them picked to go to the final undefeated spot anyway. So we'll see what goes on there.
Yeah, I did get to see quite a bit of that game, and in a stark contrast to just after watching the Xavier Providence game is not a whole lot of defense being played there. A lot of up and down and quick shots, a lot of three-pointers in that game. So, again, I feel very positive about the Musketeers just because they play defense and haven't seen that in a lot of the other big teams, ranked teams this year.
Yeah, definitely a track meet, and their defense against T.J. Leaf and Lonzo Ball was what helped them, even though both of them came alive in the second half, but they just couldn't quite pull it off. Well, it's a light week for the Musketeers, even though they played last night and they do play Saturday. It'll be another week before they play them, so anybody else, so we'll have to save some of that for next week. But in the light week, we thought we'd take a little trip down memory lane, since this is a 2017 year ending in Lucky 7. We take our Xavier fans back through some of those seasons that ended in 7, and I'll take the lead here, Jim, and jump in at any time when you've got some comments to add, because some of these things I'm sure will spark your long Xavier memory.
Okay.
The first.
Give us the Lucky Sevens, Jeff.
Lucky Sevens. Okay. Well, we've already talked a little bit about 1927. That was a couple shows ago. We talked about Coach Meyer and what he did, Joe Meyer. That That squad was 11-3, and that was his best winning percentage ever, and it was the second of 8 consecutive 500 better seasons for Coach Meyer. But not much about that team is known to exist. One of the anomalies here is that we have never had a coach in 2 sevens. Every year that ends in 7, it's been a different coach for Xavier. As we know, Xavier has been a jumping point. Who knows if Coach Mack will be around for 2027? That would be quite a thing to ask, because that would be almost 17 seasons for him. So that leads us into the fact that in 1937, Clem Crow, who was known in the Cincinnati area for his coaching both at Xavier and at UC, both in basketball and football, he had a 500 record at 7-7. It was just the 4th year for Coach Crow of 10. He did have 7 winning seasons and 2 losing records, and that was his only 500 season. After World War II, we run into Lou Hurt, and this is where we kind of go into the up and down of Xavier history. That was the first year for Coach Hurt, and, of course, Xavier didn't have sports for a few years there during the war. He was only 8-17, but he did bounce back the next year with a 24-win season. So that was a good start to the end of the 40s, and the Lucky 7 was more of a jumping-off point than it was a successful turn, and you'll see that pattern in several of the 7s. 1957 seasons with Ned Walk, and his squad went 20-8. So that was a nice little 7. The other thing on top of that is it's kind of sad because Xavier went into a bit of a downward spiral, but that was Xavier's only 20-win season between 1949 and 1983. That's the next time we would have a 20-win season. And it was Ned Walk's last. Ned Walk is one of those coaches that moved on to other pastures. He's more known for his long tenure at Arizona State, where he went 406 and 272. And he's such a legend out there in Tempe that the home court is named Coach Walk Court. That team got invited to the NIT in a time when 68 teams didn't go to the NCAA. It was usually just 16, but they rounded up with a few regional games to make it 23 that year to get things started. And X lost in the second round of the NIT to the eventual champion, Bradley. So successful season all there in the 50s. 60s, not so much. Don Ruberg is the coach. It was his last year, another 500 season like Clem Crow had in 37. And that was the last year for Coach Ruberg, as we said, who only had 1 winning season. And it's kind of sad because he did have a player on his squad who went on to star in the NBA. That was Bob Quick throughout his prime time. Bob Quick had been a local standout at Hughes and spent 4 seasons in the NBA. He was a second-round draft pick by the Baltimore Bullets in 1968, the year after Coach left. And he also spent a year in the ABA, but then his career was ended by a knee injury. And then Quick was quite a businessman as well. Started $1 million business up in Detroit, and also that's where he played for the Pistons in the NBA. And there's been some other business dealings here in Cincinnati and Florida. And Bob Quick is still with us at the age of 70. 77 finds us with Coach Tay Baker, who coaches both UC and Xavier. Unfortunately, this was not a good year for Coach or Xavier. In 1977, they went 10-17 for just a 37% winning percentage. And it's pretty much, even though it's the 4th year of the Baker year, it's one to forget. Team averaged only 63 points, but unfortunately gave up 76. So a little bit of the opposite of what we saw from Xavier last night. One shining star was a local player, Dale Harmon, who played here in the Cincinnati area at Laughlin, and transferred back from Mississippi State and led the Muskies with a 13.3 average, and also led them in assists while almost averaging 6 boards a game. Those of you who may recognize the name, Dale Harmon has been a local coach. He coached the girls at Turpin for many years, but before that he also coached the boys at several schools, including Indian Hill, who he took to the Division III Final Four in 1998. Dale still works for the Indian Hill schools today and coaches track and cross country. And a couple years ago was named, I think, the 48th best high school player by the Enquirer in Cincinnati sports history. You got to find a brightness when a team only wins 10 out of 27 games. So we'll give that to Dale.
But now you're headed toward the good years here. Now you're getting into my era.
That's what I was just going to say, Jim. Now you'll get into some of these people that you knew from your time at Xavier and the time you've been a season ticket holder. And the first one will be, you'll recognize it in 1987, it was Coach Pete Gillen. Now, this was only year 2 for Pete, so they were slowly bringing the Xaviers together. He went 19-13, and it was only one of 2 non-20-win seasons for Coach Gillen.
And Coach Gillen still holds the record for the most wins, doesn't he?
Yes, I believe he does. He does.
Yeah, he came to Xavier after Bob Stack went to Wake Forest, and Pete had been a assistant coach at Notre Dame, I believe, under Digger Phelps.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he had. And then, we ended up 3rd in the Midwest Collegiate Conference that year behind Evansville and Loyola. Just to give you there how much things change. It's been 30 years, but those rivals are pretty much in the past. What people will probably remember are the names of some of the stars of that team. The leading star was Byron Larkin, who had 24 points a game, and also Stanley Kimbrough at 16, and just a sophomore that year, but emerging as a power was Tyrone Hill. That team lost. Go ahead.
Was that the first team to go or to win an NCAA game?
They lost in the second round to Duke, which was led by Ferry, who's longtime player in the NBA and a current NBA exec, and current Harvard head coach Tommy Amaker, who also coached at Michigan. So that was the beginning of the big string. They'd lost in the first round the previous year with Coach Gillen, and had lost in '83 with Coach Bob Stack, who didn't have he kind of started the renaissance there that Pete Gillen picked up, but he didn't coach in a 7, so we didn't get a chance to talk about him.
Yeah, I do remember that game. I remember where I was when I was watching it. I was in room 319 in Richmond High School, actually watching the game with Mark Ramey, his brother, who had gone to McNicholas High School. Can't remember his first name, was actually on the team that year, and Mark and I were sitting there watching the game, and he was telling me that his dad made him go to school that day, but his dad was at the game because they were playing that, I believe, in the Hoosier Dome or Market Square Arena in Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To just catch up with those stars a little bit, everyone should know that's a Xavier fan. Larkin is still the color commentator on X Broadcast and is a local financial advisor, but he did spend 6 years in the pros with Venezuela, Germany, and Hong Kong. Dan Kimbrough had a short stint in the NBA. He did play 13 games for Detroit and Sacramento combined, and now is known for running basketball camps in the tri-state area. And who emerged as the big star was Tyrone Hill, who ended up being the 11th pick overall in the 1990 draft by Golden State, who played 14 seasons with 6 different teams, including an all-star year in 95 with Cleveland. And since the end of his playing days, Tyrone has had his number 42 retired and has worked with All-Net Records and a few other different things around the Cincinnati and Atlanta and Florida areas. So got some big...
He kind of started the tradition of the big men coming out of Xavier, who went on to be NBA stars.
He did. A big, strong guy in the middle, played center and forward, had a deft touch and stellar defense. 97 brings us into the Skip Prosser era, and Jimmy did a great job telling us all about Skip and what he meant to the Xavier community before the Skip Prosser Classic, and this was another big year. They went 23-6. They were first in the Atlantic 10 in Prosser's third year. All with the first year was the last year of the Midwest Collegiate, and then they popped into there, and they lost also in the second round to number 2 seed UCLA, and ended at that time the highest that I think Xavier had ever been in the final AP poll at 13. At one time they'd been as high as 11. And just a shout out here too. At that time, most people probably remember, some more recent fans may not, but they played in the Cincinnati Gardens, which is unfortunately soon to be no more. It's about to be torn down to make room for other entities out there near the Cincinnati Urban Youth Academy. That group was led by 5 double-digit scorers, so quite a balancing act. That's Lenny Brown, Gary Lumpkin, Torrey Braggs, James Posey, and Darnell Williams. A squad that was 5th in the country in scoring at 83 points a game. So a little bit different than the squad we've got now that's based on defense. Some of those guys would go on to other things. Posey would star for 2 more years at X and was one of the most famous 6 men that we had. And then he went on to a 12-year NBA career. I mean, in terms of championships, you might say he was the most successful Musketeer. He won NBA championships with the Miami Heat in 2006 and the Boston Celtics in 2008. And last year, he won one with the Cleveland Cavaliers as assistant coach, where he's still currently employed. So quite a run there for James Posey. Darnell Williams played professionally for 7 years, and he's currently in his 2nd year as the head basketball coach at Kentucky State in Frankfort, Kentucky. The highlight of that year, and I bet you remember this one, Jim, was Lenny Brown's last second shot to beat the then number 1 ranked Cincinnati Bearcats in the crosstown shootout.
I do recall that, and actually I just read about that game in the Bill Cook game on the crosstown shootout that I have been reading, almost finished with.
Good. And we look forward to hearing a lot more of that as we get closer to the shootout here in just a couple of weeks. That brings us to second to last. That's 2007. Sean Miller, 25-9. This was a team that was first. Again, a lot of threes here. There was Miller's 3rd year. They were first in the Atlantic 10, 13-3. They lost in the second round of the Atlantic 10 tournament and also lost in the second round of the NCAAs. But to an Ohio State team, and I bet you were watching this game too, an overtime game that former ex-coach Thad Matta went on to win with the stars Mike Conley and Greg Oden, and that team went all the way to the final game that year before they lost to the champion Florida. So who knows what would have happened if we were able to get past.
What I remember about that game, number one, it was played in Rupp Arena, so it was pretty close to home, although I was not there. The other thing was near the end of regulation, the Musketeers had a 3-point lead and decided not to foul and allowed the Buckeyes to get up a 3-pointer that tied the game to send it into overtime. And some people said maybe they should have fouled. If they'd have fouled, they might have won the game in regulation, only giving them 2 free throws instead of a chance at the 3-pointer.
Well, we always know that in any arena there's 18,000 coaches that are better than the guy sitting on the bench. So, but who knows? You got us there, and you can't knock Sean Miller for his run at Xavier. In fact, going to an Elite 8, that's what this team set up. They had 4 double-digit scorers in Justin Dolman, Stanley Burrell, Drew Lavender, and Justin Cage, and Josh Duncan had 9.3 a game. Like I said, that team may not have gone as far as they went, but next year's squad was Xavier's only 30-win season. And unfortunately, they did lose to UCLA in that regional final by going to the Elite 8. And that is as far as Xavier has ever been able to go in an NCAA tournament.
That was a team that knocked off Bob Huggins in West Virginia in the Sweet 16, one of the most famous games, I think, in Xavier basketball history.
Mm-hmm. Just to give you a recap on some of those stars, Justin Dolman is still playing professionally in Spain, where he's been an all-star, a league MVP, and led his club to a championship there in 2004 with Valencia before signing with his current club of FC Barcelona. Stanley Burrell, who I didn't know this until I started doing my research, shares his name with the rapper MC Hammer. MC Hammer's real name is Stanley Burrell. But he was the Muskie's defensive hammer and traveled the world playing professionally since his 2008 graduation. He's played, he started in Belgium, moved to Bosnia, Poland, Germany, Turkey, Israel, Japan, Belarus, Hungary, and now he's back in Poland still playing. Drew Lavender, the Oklahoma transfer who moved in for his last couple of years, played in Europe for a time, and now he also has a string of basketball camps around the area. Justin Cage also went to Europe and is currently a starter for Belfius Montenac team in the Belgian league. He's basically spent his whole career there. And, of course, Coach Miller, we know, left after the Sweet 16 appearance in 2009 to take over the Arizona Wildcats, where he still works the sidelines. And he's the only, former coach that we're talking about. Thad Matta is still coaching, of course, at Ohio State, but he didn't have a 7, and you detailed well Skip Prosser and his unfortunate early death. But Pete Gillen was back in town last week. He still does broadcasts for CBS Sports and was at the UC Marshall game. And that leads us to wonder what could happen this year. Is it going to be a jumping point for a better year next year or a solid year? They already have 11 wins, and it could end up being their fourth 20-win season in a row, which would make it 11 out of 12 for the Muskies.
Yeah, and again, with last night's win, you hope to, in the Big East, win all your home games and hopefully maybe then win 4 or 5 on the road to give you a decent record that would definitely, with the preseason for the Musketeers, would get them into the NCAA this year.
They shouldn't have, unless the wheels totally fall off the truck. Probably no doubt the Muskies will be in the NCAA. It's just a matter of what the seed will be, and then working through the Big East will give us a better idea with teams like Villanova and Creighton and Butler, as well as a tough Seton Hall team. Kind of divided, looks like, into the top half and the bottom half, as you detailed last week. So a quick run through the Lucky Sevens, and we'll turn it back to you because I'm sure you have a couple of questions you'd like to ask me.
Well, yes, of course, we have to always finish up with trivia. But, again, just take Xavier fans back to the opening game last year in the Big East. They were undefeated, actually. I think they were 12-0 non-conference, and they went to Villanova. Was a big game for them. Both teams, I think Villanova actually had a loss at that point, but they went to Villanova, and if you recall, early on in the game, Edmund Sumner took a hard spill, suffered a concussion, was out of the game, actually was out for about the next 2 weeks because of that concussion, and the Musketeers went on to get pummeled in that game. It was over 20 points, close to 30 points. They actually lost that game. So a much better start to the season this year with last night's victory, which leads me to my trivia. On December 31st, New Year's Eve, 2013, the Muskies played their first ever Big East game. Can you name me their opponent? You have 9 choices.
Well, they were still in, you said 2013?
2013, the first
year of the Big East.
Of the Big East, the new Big East, as some call it.
Yeah. No, we're not going to call it that. Big East is a Big East. They bought the name. They need to stick with it. And again, what is hard? How many guesses do I get? I know there are 9 options.
I'll give you 3.
You give me 3. Well, it's hard to say because they do rotate those things around. I don't know exactly how they do it. Now, considering you just talked about Villanova last year, they're probably out. And of course, you're playing Georgetown this year, so they're probably out. I'll just take a flyer and say the Redmen of St. John's. You
are correct.
No.
The Musketeers started their Big East history with a 70-60 win on New Year's Eve in 2013. I was actually at that game. They actually, if I recall, it was kind of strange. They started the game at about 10 o'clock. So the new year actually came in before the game was over. They actually kind of stopped for just a second, said Happy New Year, and then continued to play the end of the game. I think there was about 4 to 5 minutes left.
You don't see that happening very often. And of course, some of the stars of that team were, Matt Stainbrook and Justin Martin. That's one of the first years for Miles Davis as well. Even though he got in the game, didn't do much, if I recall. But they'll.
And we haven't talked about Miles Davis. There was it was interesting on Monday, of course, right after Christmas. Some of the boards were saying that there was a Miles Davis sighting that he was in town. Well, whoever posted that must have had seen someone else, because Shannon Russell reported at their first two practices after Christmas that he was not around. And Chris Mack was asked again in his press conference this week if Miles Davis was coming back, which he said yes. And he said, when will he be back? And he basically said, when you see him, he's back.
Yeah. Well, I got a feeling you're not going to see him back, like I said before, until classes are back in session and he's had a chance to be back on campus and make that transition, even though the NCAA lets him come in earlier. I think we'll see him sometime about the end of January.
Yeah, it's anybody's guess. Again, Chris Mack is holding his cards close to the vest on this one.
Well, right now, a team that's 11-2, you can't complain. They do have a couple of holes to fill, but hopefully the youngsters will step up. We'll be here next Thursday again. We'll be able to talk about that Georgetown game and other upcoming Big East games that gets into full swing as we go through the Big East. And, of course, join us on Tuesdays for our Trogcast, the two really old guys talking NCAA sports. And with all the teams that we highlighted last year, we should have a lot to talk about on Tuesday.
Yes, we should. Well, I'm going to have to get on with my day. I'm headed to the Biltmore today to take a tour of that famous American structure.
And then you'll tough it out by going down to Hilton Head, South Carolina. Tell you, Jim, you do a good job with the rough life that you have. We're proud of you up here. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I think on New Year's Eve down there they're predicting 70-degree high. So think of me suffering down there while you are shivering a little bit up in Cincinnati.
You poor baby. Of course, it will come back to you in some way, shape, or form. So that's your Razorcast for this week. We'll say go Muskies, especially against the Hoyas this week, so I can win my ice cream bet with Chi-Ray Chang, one of the students from Japan. And we'll be back to talk about that game and all things Xavier next Thursday.
All right, go Muskies.